research team on Didactic of Arts and Movement at the Faculty of Science of Education, University of Geneva. And he is now the principal flute professor at Music Faculty, International School of Geneva. He holds a PhD in Sciences of Education from the University of Geneva, as well as an honorary doctorate degree by the National University of Education of Peru. And Dr. de la Calle will speak about music, but I don't have the title exactly. Let's see here.
That is the title.
Music role in education and human development. 3 paths to understand the absolute truth from a Vedic perspective. Okay. And I think he will also give us some demonstration, artistic demonstration. So open your ears.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really an honor to have been invited by Mr. Daniel Janin. Thank you, Daniel, to invite me to share my learning experiences deeply involved in folk music culture. I am 46 years old. Why I am saying my age? Because through the exposition you will see different cultures, and after you will wonder how old is he now. So, just to tell you, I am born in Peru, the Incas culture, South America. I was living until I was 15 years old in Peru, and then I went to Japan for 5 years. I lived in Japan 5 years, and then I went to India 7 years of my life. The most marvelous philosophical, musical, and spiritual experience of all my life, far beyond from Europe and from Japan. And after I will share with you why. And after India, I am already 20 years in Europe. In Denmark, 13 years, 8 years studying at Lund University, and now 7 years in Geneva. I got my PhD 1.5 years ago almost in science of education. So, I am a member of the research team on the Didactic of Arts and Movement. What you will hear and see today is the connection with the absolute truth, but through music, but through the science of humanity. So this lecture, Flute Performance, is a reflection of my experiences in learning musical tradition, as I told you, in Peru, Japan, India, and Europe. By describing what I learned through the different approaches to music, I suggest that music is a wonderful tool to develop one's whole personality. This is, we could say, the abstract of this presentation. At 5 years old, my father brought me Inca's flute. Inca's flute has 5,000 years tradition. 5,000 years tradition, and you could see there that the original instrument of this Quena, this one, is a piece of bamboo, Quena. You have seen also in the street how they play. It's 6 holes, 1 hole, but 5,000 years ago it was only 2 holes or 1 hole. Why? It was not for entertainment purposes, neither for the show. It was for meditation purposes, for self-realization 5,000 years ago, just through the sound of the Quena. In the end of this presentation I will perform, so you will hear how is the sound. And then the siku. Siku is in Aymara. Aymara 5,000 years ago, it was all the culture from the Titicaca Lake. And this is the siku, 5,000 years ago, the Andean pan-flute. So the original character, as I explained you for these self-realization purposes, for both instruments, it's an opening in which the soul gives the best of oneself. if the performer lacks a cultivated character, the expression of the sound will be poor. When I was 15, it was my karma, my destiny. A very famous Japanese actress, she went to Peru and she saw my concert and she was touched and she said, Luis, let's go to Japan. I will make your career. So I was in Japan for 5 years making concerts and recordings, but it was not something we could say common. The director of my concerts, because always I was looking for self-realization, the director was the no theater art master, Hideo Kanze, from the Kanze school founded in the 14th century. He taught me what is the philosophy of the Buddhism, which is in music, the meditation on the unity, on the mind, the flute, and the body. Then, after I was in Japan for 5 years, this master Hideo Kanze presented me 2 future options. Luis, you continue doing your successful career in Japan and soon in Europe, or you would like to do research on the Indian cultural traditions of the Zen Buddhism used in no philosophy. So when you are 19 years old, you believe you are the conqueror of the world. I decided the second option. That's why I went to India. At the age of 19, during 7 years of my life, I studied Vedic philosophy and Vaisnava music. Vaisnava music, it is an influential culture in the evolution of the musical tradition of India. My teachers, I have teachers there like Hideo Kanze in Japan, the Buddhists, but in the Vaishnavism I had 2 teachers, which I own a lot. It was Srila Prabhupada and Srila Jayapataka Maharaj, who taught me that music is understood the same to make yoga, but specifically Bhakti Yoga. And I define what is Bhakti Yoga. Philosophy and practice in which the mind is controlled and yoked through love with the absolute and the divine. I studied the performance on the flutes and their music from Japan and India, and I discovered the same thing as Peru. There were traditions in these cultures. Having the opportunity to know very closely these 3 ancestral cultures from which I learned in my oral tradition: observation, listening, and imitation. Nothing at all of written tradition. Everything it was, like you said in Europe, by heart. Hence my interest in the observations of the different forms of transmission. So after my Vaishnava Indian life experiences, I was curious to study the European transfer flute at the Music Conservatory in Denmark, where only 1 flute student was accepted per year. It was like almost 20 years ago. 3 years of classical and jazz music. This conservatory radically changed me. I discovered fidelity to writing and rhythm or normative knowledge. My curiosity led me to travel to Europe, where for 3 years I studied at this conservatory. Desiring to integrate the contribution of these 4 cultures, it came we could call it the uncommon idea to create a flute or to make an innovation. So the mouthpiece, this is the mouthpiece, this is the head joint. This head joint belongs the same as the shakuhachi. The shakuhachi from the Buddhist monks in Japan, it is the same one. Of course, the shakuhachi is a little bit thicker, but it's the same family. And the same family like the China. I don't know if you have heard about the Xiao, the Chinese traditional flute. It's the same family, like the Inca flute and the shakuhachi. So I wanted to integrate the 4 cultures in one instrument. So I invented and patented a flute, the Inca flute head joint, which is the same head joint as the shakuhachi, is connected to the key mechanism of the European transverse flute's body in order to perform the scientific music forms from the Indian rhythms and scales, ragas. So this is this. You play like this, and it's like this, the same head joint. Of course, in the end, I will perform with that, so you'll hear that. 2 cultures, European and the Inca's culture. We could say the bamboo culture from Japan, India, and Peru in one instrument. Based on this invention, I obtained a bachelor's degree as a soloist and 2 master's degrees in education. And I studied 8 years at Lund University in Sweden. 8 years. I learned Swedish. With Professor Dr. Anders Jugar Chapelon. And I had the honor, it was the first time that a musician, by being alive, is getting a university degree on his own musical invention. For many years I have been a teacher and soloist performer of different kinds of flute. And one day I asked myself, what is a tradition? What is really a tradition? You have seen the Peruvian, the Inca, the Japanese, the Indian Vaisnava, the European. What is a tradition? To answer this question, after Sweden, I went to Geneva and I approached this university, and I had the honor to be part from 2012 of the research team in Didactic of Art and Movement under the tutorship of Dr. Isabel Milly and Professor René Rickenmann. They were the directors of my doctoral dissertation. And they gave me the tools to carry out this work of my thesis in science of education. This work allowed me to travel to Chile, Japan, and India and make fields of teachers of these musical traditions. Now we will present videos in this because it's too broader to do in Japan, India, Peru, and Europe. Now we will focus on the Andean tradition, the Incas one, my tradition where I was born. So you will see 2 videos with an ethnomusicologist. His name is Pancho from Chile, and the brothers Sidgar and Freddy from Geneva. So we will present these 2 videos of these 2 experts from the 2 approaches which are mentioned are different. So now you will see how an Inca's ethnomusicologist share this kind of music.
Shall we switch off the lights?
Yes, yes, please. Yes, it's okay. Thank you. What is it? No, it's okay. It's okay. Okay. No, that
the electric one.
I will read this. Okay, it's okay.
Which one? This one. The electric one, yeah.
This?
The power.
The power is already done.
Already done.
Yes.
So we lost it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So in the second video you will see another approach. This approach is the popular folk music approach. Before it was the scientific approach, ethnomusicologist. Now it's a more popular perspective. And it was filmed at the Atelier de Ethnomusicologie in Geneva. Please, lights, please, the lights. So I realized that in the same oral tradition of these three music cultures, there were two different approaches: the ethnomusicological and the popular folk music. These different transmission practices that we just have observed in the two workshops based on these two approaches led us to the conclusion that tradition is not pure, it's not immutable. Tradition always is alive and is in constant transformation. And now we will explain the origins and historical culture function of these three musical spheres, so you will know how is their philosophy and how is that connection with the absolute truth. This is the definition that in Science of Education, University of Geneva, we give to traditional music. And we will go through the Andean, the Japanese, and the Vaisnava from India. A traditional Andean music refers to pre-Columbian transmission practices that are not currently anymore practiced, and had its origins a ritual festive function inspired by the Andean mythology, which is the opposites complementaries. It means night and the day, woman and man. And is concretized through the dialogue between the community, the music, but in group, and that is called tropa music, and the elements of nature, the Mother Earth, the moon, etc. The original character of those instruments, in this case the quena, this original character is represented through the following dance, which has 1,000 years ago, even up to date, it's already been up in performing. So you will see it has been taking the photo many years ago, and I will describe this thing, and I have to read it because it's a bit, I would like to be more precise about it. Okay, doing research on these instruments, I found that the feather art of the Aymara people from the Altiplano Titicaca, which is shaped like a rainbow. This rainbow thing is in black and white, unfortunately. Up top of a dancer's head represent the set of colors emanating from the activated chakras. The second, the dancer breastplates. You could see a big breast. This breastplate is the skin of puma, and that is called the Chaca Puma of the Tiahuanaco culture, in Titicaca Lake, pre-Incas culture. And that, listen, represent the inner warrior who eliminates psychological vices and defects. And the third, the Quena that solemnly blow the dancer represent the spine, whose secret centers of power can be activated by the Quena sound, the Andean scales. So now you will see, please, if you could turn off the light, turn on, and you could put it a bit up. How is this tropa music, group music, the dialogue between the Andean community with the element of nature? So this is the traditional Andean music. Oh. So now I'll go to traditional Japanese music. Please, lights. Yes, thank you. In the 16th century, there were a group of monks, Zen Buddhist monks. The name is Komuso. They developed what is called, exactly, excuse me, achieve enlightenment through sound, through the shakuhachi. So they were doing, in that century, a deep music, which is a structure of the concept of ma. It means the relationship between sounds, the silence, and the breath. This meditative music is inspired by the Buddhist philosophy of nirvana, or the complete negation of the individuality of the person. You have here how they look, those monks, the Komuso. Through practical training on this way of practicing of the instrument, the unity of the mind, body, and instrument, like the nirvana of the Buddhists, results in important insight, habits, human and spiritual values, attitudes, and behavior which goes to the enlightenment. And now you will see how is Japanese traditional music, and always you have seen a very important element, always is in group, never is performing alone, always in group, and after I will explain why is this phenomenon. The light, thank you. Lights, please. So what you have seen is performance in group and always dancing. They never play like you will see me now. After you, I will play like this static. Never. Always is dancing in group. This is traditional music. And now it's coming the Vaisnava music, where I was deeply involved 7 years. Vaisnava music had its root in the Sama Veda, a vast collection of verses. It's called Sama. This is the musical version of the Rig Veda, set to melody and sung by singer priests. We are speaking about before 5,000 years ago. Through Vedic literature, musical sound and its profound theological significance lead to Nada Brahman. Nada Brahman, or sacred sound, are the linguistic word and the non-linguistic sound or music. When I was in India, I had this blessed to live with the world best Carnatic in his home, at his home. World best Carnatic flute player. His name is Shashank Subramanian. He's not from this world. I mean, he's a tremendous genius. So I learned with him basic things of Carnatic music, because normally you need at least 20-25 years to master this kind of music. And when I was having my night conversation with him, he told me something very interesting about the non-linguistic sound of Nada Brahman. He said, when the voice or the performance of any instrument is perfectly trained with all the notes of the Indian classical music, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, or do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, Western version, we will discover that these notes are variations of one note, which is the Om or Nada Brahman. Very interesting. This is the non-linguistic sound of music, of this sacred sound, Nada Brahman. Nada Brahman in its highest personal manifestation is known as the form of Janardana Vishnu. We are speaking the other aspect of the sacred sound. Nada Rupa, Smrito, Brahma, Nada Rupa, Janardana. This notion of Nada Brahman was passed on in later Vaisnava works, such as the Vaisnava Padavali compiled and edited by Sahitya Ratna Sri Hare Krishna Mukhopadhyaya. So when I was going through this Vaisnava music, I saw the contribution of this music for the Western music education. It has system of rhythm, talas, and romantic scale ragas with scientific forms between the notes and rhythms, which were structured 1,000 years ago, which when sung along with mantras, awake a person's higher level of consciousness by acting on the internal personality and transforming its sensibility, way of thinking, and the state of the soul, even one moral character. Scholarly, enlightened, devotional artists and poets wrote Vaishnava songs, and thus these songs possessed great literature value, which made them widely popular. So this is a draw how it was Vaishnava like 500 years ago played. And now you will see, of course, like you have the Octave Symphony, Beethoven, very energetic, dramatic, and also there is Schubert, romantic and soft. Also in Vaishnava music are these kind of dynamics. What you will see now in this video is very energetic, and it's just with dancing and percussion. And in the end, I will play with flute. Please, the light. The lights, please. So we have seen the original culture from three cultures, the traditional music. Now we go to the second sphere, the ethnomusicologist sphere. You have the definition. An example in Peru, for example, today, ethnomusicologists are interested in the transmission practices of a community near to Machu Picchu. The name is Queros, due to their proximity of the Andean traditional music. As a very famous ethnomusicologist, the name is Queros, due to their proximity of the Andean traditional music. As a very famous ethnomusicologist, French one, Giraud, he reminds us all cultures to a certain degree are impregnated by elements of others. Thanks to these practical practices of transmission, approach, practices, in my thesis, we have become aware that the tradition, as I repeat again, is a construction of the history. It's not pure. It's a construction of the history, but it's in a constant renovation. For example, the practices of the community of the Queros would be a stage in the evolution of these transmission practices. Andean traditional music, for example, cannot be summarized as practices of a specific group at a specific time. And the third one, sphere, is the popular folk music. It's a fusion between the European Western elements with the traditional music. And this is linked to a national identity, to a syncretism between the traditional cosmovision of a culture and the cosmovision, whether the Catholic, where Cristobal Colón conquered South America, the Buddhist, or the Hindu. Second, to the political and the institutional power. And the third is the aesthetic taste that comes especially from urban elements, characterized by the show as a dimension. In this way, we have observed that in the last two spheres, ethno and the folk music, the contents of teachings in the same tradition are very different, due among others to their historical cultural functions. From a transmission practices, what richness this diversity. And now, in order to learn from all this presentation, what learning could we obtain from observing these two, the ethno and the popular folk music approaches? We learned that the oral tradition of these three ancestral cultures, the Andean, the No, and the Vaisnava, manifests, you have seen, that's why I was trying to get playing in group, dancing, and I will continue describing. They manifest something alive, until now, even, something alive of certain characteristics of its transmission practices. I will present these three, because there are several, and I will compare these three oral traditions with my practices at the Swedish Music Conservatory. The first one, the use of scales, rhythm, and singing of mantras as melodic and rhythmical scientific aesthetic forms, like in Vaisnava culture, together with scientific discourse and systematic training by the teacher, enhance the performance musical expression by elevating the consciousness of the performer. In the Western European music conservatories, these music elements lacked scientific and spiritual principle, therefore did not uplift enough the consciousness. Training for self-realization in Europe, in the conservatories, does not exist. The use of dance is the synchronization between playing, singing, and dancing. It's a double simultaneous activity by the performer, as I explained before. And the third is very, very important and very interesting. Learn to speak before reading. First, make music, and only then understand how it is made. Always in this music conservatory, you start with solfege, music theory, and all these techniques separately. And that, we call it here in the Western, the elementarization of knowledge. Now it's coming soon, our performance. I will show the existential contribution from oral music tradition. The music of the three oral traditions from Peru, Japan, and India is an educational tool that contributes to the understanding of the absolute truth. Music reflects culture, and culture has philosophy. And this is the three cultures. The goal is to understand by their way, by their level, the absolute truth. This absolute truth was considered by Socrates and Platon as the goal of human life. In the dialogues of Platon, Timaeus is confirmed that the real self is not the body, but it is the soul, where Socrates passionately exhorts everyone to give attention and care to this inner divine part. Analogies to the warning of attachment, to the delusions of the desire described in the Upanishads of the Vedic scriptures. The Vedic culture. The Vedic scriptures of ancient India have played an essential role in the understanding of absolute truth, the goal of human life as stated by Socrates and Platon. The word Veda means knowledge. It's Sanskrit, it's one of the oldest in this planet. Currently, we use the term science to identify the type of authorized knowledge in which human progress is based. However, for the ancient Vedic civilization, the word Veda has a much deeper meaning than the word science has today for us. This is because in those times, scientific research was not restricted to the world we perceive it through the physical senses. And the definition of human progress was not limited to the massive technological exploitation of this material nature. In the Vedic times, the main objective of science was the eternal, the science of the spiritual soul and its relation with the absolute truth as the supreme personality of Godhead, like in ancient Vedic time they call it. Apart from the Vedic civilization, let us read about extraordinary progress in material fields like military, science, medicine, art, philosophy, math. Human progress in the Vedic culture meant to understand the absolute truth. 3 Vedic paths in order to understand the absolute truth. There is a book 500 years ago, Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And I will focus the Andean, the No, and the Vaisnava within the perspective of this Vedic, Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. 3 paths. The first one, the Karma Kanda, the path of ceremonial acts and sacrificial rites of sacrifice to achieve a good result. In this case, performed by the tropa musician in order to have, for example, rain for a good harvest. This is the Karma Kanda. Is to do an activity but thinking, being conscious to get a result. The second, I think, now I will perform. So you will know how is the sound of this Andean music. I need, please, sound for my playback. Could you please help me how to go to find my... Could you please help me, please? I need to go to my, please, key. Yeah, here. I think I am here, no?
Yes.
And then, yes. Hopefully. Okay. Would like more sound. Much more sound. Much more sound. Very good. Thank you. So now I will perform Andean music, but in nowadays, it's not 1,000 years ago, and this is the tradition how enriched by many elements through period of time. I will perform just the traditional Quena, and this is a bigger Quena. It's called Quena-Flute. It's lower, the register. And then I will perform this big, it's medium size. Because in South America we have the biggest pan-flutes in the world. We have 1 meter 80, 62 meters pan-flutes. Next time maybe I could perform something that is very energetic for the whole body. So now I will perform my own composition. 31 years ago I wrote this instrumental song, which is inspired in that time about my town. It's called Calle. It's an Aymara name. The name is Al Pie del Carrizo. Chacya en Aymara significa carrizo. Chaclacayo es la tierra de los carrizos. Esta inspiración nuestra representa el especial cariño que le tenemos a Chaclacayo y a sus pobladores. So it's going more. So this is the sound. This is the sound from the culture where my body was born. Being more exactly, because we have by many births in different nationalities. So the next one, I will perform the Japanese music. Yes. This is not the one, excuse me. Yes. So now it's coming the second path from the Vedic perspective. Is the path of the philosophical wisdom of the science, of the soul of meditation, the jnana, knowledge, kanda is path. For example, the Greek philosopher Socrates, who believed that through meditation a person can acquire self-knowledge, the famous know yourself, or the knowledge of the soul, Atman, in Vedic Sanskrit language, our identity making, the person virtuous. When the individual is virtuous, he acts in the right way, and by doing so, he becomes happy because he acts properly, and according to Plato, because he strives to attain to the divine. This is the Western European one, the Greek one. And from the traditional Japanese music, you have the knowledge of the Buddhists of the traditional Japan music presenting two aspects. The spiritual soul, they said, it's empty. And second, it's formless. It doesn't have form. Now I will perform how is Japanese music. And again, I think I learned. Yes, it's here. So now I will present my flute innovation. This is the only song I will perform with this innovation. The song is a traditional, we could call it also pop, traditional Japanese song. It's called Shikura Men. Yes, one more time. So we are coming soon to finish this exposition. We will go back again to according to the Vedic perspective, in practical terms of the understanding of the absolute truth, this conception of emptiness I consider inferior to the consciousness used by the performer of the traditional Andean music. Why? Because this philosophy of nirvana cancels or extinguishes the individuality of the person, the body, the mind, and the soul, which is indispensable individuality for the understanding of the absolute truth. However, in the performance of Andean music, this individuality of the musician is maintained because there is a dialogue. Dialogue is two persons. There is a dialogue between the Andean musicians, they keep their individuality, and the universe through the offering of the fruits of the work, music performance in this case, by worshipping the Pachamama, Madre Tierra, the Earth, Mother Earth, the Inti, the Sun, etc. And the third path, described in the Vedic perspective, is the Kevalananda Kanda. They scientifically describe it through a compendium of hundreds of pages, the path of enjoyment that comes from the divine love. The highest path in the understanding of the absolute truth, according to the Vedic perspective. The internalization of the knowledge of the science of the soul in one's heart to awaken divine love towards the absolute truth, but in the Vedic perspective as the supreme personality of Godhead, and understand that not only we have the duty to offer this supreme person the fruits of work like in Andean music, but to offer oneself through an attitude of unconditional and spontaneous service. This is called bhakti, taught and transmitted in Vaisnava music through ragas and scales and chanting of the mantra. So now we will perform for you just a short version. How is this music? We have performed Andean music, Japanese music, and now it's coming Indian, but through the Vaisnava music. I would like to invite, please, Madam Ambika and Ram Das to perform together. Give me 2 minutes and I finish, please. Come back here. No, I don't have. No, it's blocked. It's blocked now. So I just wanted to show the last slide. All these integrations from the European, Andean, Japanese, and Indian, I have integrated with children in Geneva with 50 nationalities. And I wanted to present a video of children of 8 years old playing ragas, talas of Vaisnava music, but with the harmony of European music, but with the pincuyo, with the bamboo recorder from the Titicaca Lake. It's very touching video, but unfortunately, everything has its cost, that's why. But okay, I would like us to finish that. I argued while in reflection that all these 3 oral culture, tradition, could be a model for society today. It means the priority of the formation of the character of the person while doing activities. So, my conclusion, it will be that music is a unique, wonderful tool to stimulate the development of human and spiritual values of the person, and by elevating the human consciousness. And it's just to make music is just like a yoga, even though it's metal music, but it has such power, the sound, that one gets concentrated almost 100%. What we could say, we make all these scientific millenarian forms of ragas, talas, and mantras from ancient times. For me, life is an art to live, and a work of art is the expression of our personality, but as a whole, of our sensibility and ability. Thank you.
Question
Comments.
or comments or yes. So with whom shall I start? I don't know.
Switch on, right?
It's on. It's on.
Okay, then
I have a comment to make.
Yes, please.
I thoroughly enjoyed your musical interlude. It was very, very fascinating. I was having a very strong headache because I'm used to having coffee. And I was telling constantly, I need coffee. And when you were playing that, I was so much engrossed in your music, and especially when you were doing alone, and also when you were joined later on. It really acted as a therapy for me, and I was so moved. I was into it. I had tears.
Who we are, our connection with the nature, and our connection with the absolute truth. So he asked me to compose the melodies for more than 300 poems in Bengali, and each poem has his own scale, raga, and his own tala. And this is now I am not only going to do only this, talk. Yes, and all these, how to say, DJs, which conquer, we could say, 60% of the music industry from the whole world. I would like to come with my flute. This is my design. Now I'm just revealing my mind to you. With my flute, also with this instrument, but with this kind of music. Because in order to come to all this young generation, we have to do it through their way, through their consciousness. And this consciousness is this kind of music. So my answer, I will try to do it as soon as possible. With all my heart.
Any more comments, question, remark?
I'd like to thank you for a beautiful musical presentation, especially how you showed the Vaisnavas and the Karmakanda and the Karakanda, and it was really you could feel the difference
when you did the Vaisnava part, because we are connected to it. So thank you so much for such a wonderful experience. Wanted to thank you. Thank you.
Another question from...
Maybe Martin Netz. Maybe you remember the tune of this movie, The Mission?
I have
The spiritual tune. The main theme tune of this movie called The Mission.
Is Cristobal Columbus? No.
No,
When they come, okay,
it's a movie someone made. It's called The
I will
Mission.
check.
It's someone who went as a priest to South America and
Yes.
it's very spiritual, and I hope you could play this tune. My favorite tune also for flute. This theme actually is played by a noble, but I think it makes more sense to be played by a pan-flute.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. For sure, I will consider it.
Okay, shall we go to our last lecturer before the discussion? Or any more question, comment?
The flute has a very deep, is adapted very deep in the Indian culture.
Yes.
Could you explain about that?
Yes, you mean the origins of this very old?
Yes, we always see pictures of Krishna with the flute.
Yes.
Why does he have a flute? Or is that the reason why you picked the flute?
I mean, the supreme flute is, according to the Vedic scripture, is Krishna. Krishna is the supreme attractive, and he's the supreme flutist. And my answer is, I mean, because he's the supreme, the eternal, there is no time for flute playing on the flute instrument itself, because it's coming from this personality, which according to the Vedic scripture is the supreme attractive, it means the supreme personality of Godhead, and that it doesn't have time and not antiquity. Yes, this is my answer. But of course, 5,000 years ago, according to the Vedic scripture, it was only one language. According to the Vedic, it said Sanskrit. It was only one king, Parikshit Maharaj, who ruled the whole planet. Of course, he has some ministers in different parts of the world. There are some connections between Vedic and the Inca. For example, near to the Titicaca Lake, you can find and see a big temple of Shiva Lingas. Big temple of Shiva Lingas in the Titicaca Lake. Then, in the entrance of the Machu Picchu, also in different cities, Inca, you have a Ganesh, an elephant in the entrance, and never were the elephants in South America, so far we know. And the whole structure of the Inca's empire is the same as the Vedic. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Excuse me, I am speaking a little bit in Sanskrit. Is the priest, the intellectual class, the rulers, the warriors, the rulers of the country. The third it was the businessman, and the Shudra, the worker class. It's the same like the Incas. So coming what I was trying to tell you is that there were connections between the Vedic. And in that time, 5,000 years ago, according to the Vedic perspective, it was only one capital in the whole planet. Like before, I will tell you the name, and you know the Indians, of course. Before Cristobal Columbus, there were not Argentina, Colombia, or nothing. It was the whole Inca's empire, and only one capital in the whole South America, Cusco, which means in Quechua, the Inca's language, the navel of the world, where Machu Picchu is. So it was one capital. It was Hastinapur, Nueva Delhi, which is now.
No, Delhi.
So there is a lot also to talk about it and to expose it. And maybe now to the Western mentality we are breaking some paradigms. But I am saying from the Vedic perspective, it's not from the Western one. So that is my answer. The flute, it has been always existing. It's eternal. Because of Krishna.
This is a comment.
Yes.
Is a possible answer to the question why flute? Because it's probably technology, the most simple instrument there is. You take a piece of bamboo and you play around and blow into it, it makes a sound. Then they discovered the frequency, would say, or the sound level is depending on the length of flute.
Yes.
So they connected a few ones and made some music. Maybe that's the first form of instrumental music. That's my...
Within that perspective, you are right. Thanks. Yes. Yes. And I would like just to add something that the musical instrument the nearest to express our spirituality and also for the material musical perspective is the voice. The voice. This is the original one, the voice. In India, all the flute players, they have to sing. If they don't sing, they are not allowed to play the flute. Why? Because the foundation of music instrument is the voice. And like you, Mister, you say, with the simples, yes, which is the nearest instrument to the voice? The flute. Because and the trumpet and the saxophone like that is different than the flute because you have to do the sound. It's different, it's complicated. But the flute you just blow like the foundation of all instruments at the same time. So I just would like to add to your comment.